Welcome to the GuestX podcast, where my co-host Brian Hamaui and I uncover the latest technologies and human-driven initiatives that are raising customer expectations and forever changing how we are defining customer experience across a host of industries. If you are passionate about creating incredible content and unique experiences, join us as we talk to leading product and experience experts across the globe and learn about how today's most successful brands are setting themselves apart from the competition. Good evening from Brussels. Good afternoon, I guess, from Orlando, Mr. Hamaui. How are you, bud?
Barely morning, or barely afternoon.
Barely afternoon.
I'm still waking up. Things are good. How are you?
I'm good. You know, the short stay, some of the shorties last week, the short stay summit, was very impressed with, I think, only the second short stay summit they've done, just a one-day event, but did really well. I think they had 500-600 attendees on the property management side. Really interesting. One of the takeaways I got was over here, a lot of the property managers, and our guest today will appreciate this, but a lot of the property managers had booths because they do, over here, it's a lot more common, what I'll call condo worlds model, right? Alex, where they'll have other property managers listing their listings on their sites. So they kind of serve as a little bit of an OTA, but also their conferences will attract some single unit or 2 or 3 unit homeowners who are, want to check out the different property management companies. And so, Sykes Cottages has got 23,000 or so over here, but they had a booth. A number of players Under the Doormats, real big in London. They had a booth. So that was pretty interesting, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was very disappointed I didn't get out there. There's this thing called a passport, and before you travel, apparently it needs to be valid. And so from going to Europe last year and doing some of those shows to this year and having an expired passport and a slow government to issue them, I completely missed the show.
Yeah, what a load of crap. You need a passport, I tell you what. Well, I will give you, so we've got to get it going, and I'm excited today about our guest, because it's someone I haven't gotten to spend a lot of time in the industry, but he's been in the industry for a really long time. But I will give you, just a real quick funny story. So I woke up the Wednesday of the shorties and just had this kind of weird feeling that something wasn't right. So I got up, it was really early. I go down, I started working. I was reading over because we were leaving London to go over to Brussels for a while before we head over to the Focusrite conference, which I'm excited you and I are going to be broadcasting from there. But so I'm looking over the entry requirements, valid vaccination, got it. But then I noticed vaccination is hyperlinked. That's weird. So I click on it. Your second jab, as they say in London, I guess, could not be more than 271 days old if you didn't have the booster. And I'm like running through the math in my head. I'm like, it's going to be close, like really, really close. So I rushed back 295 days for both my wife and I. So we end up running to just a pharmacy, local pharmacy, government healthcare over there, like, explain to them, look, I don't pay taxes here. Here's my situation. They're like, oh yeah. So we get our booster in London so that we can make it into Belgium. How about that?
Now I'm going to have to look into boosters on top of everything.
Yeah. and then my wife got sick from her booster. Yeah, spent a day, curled up in bed, and I had the short stay summit the next day, so I was lucky it didn't have any effect on me. But so read everything. I guess the new lesson in today's world, you got to read everything really carefully. Something I know I'm not very good at. But hey, why don't you give a little intro today for our guest, and let's jump into it. It's been a little while since you and I have gotten together, so this is going to be fun.
Yeah, let's do it. Today's guest, he's an industry veteran. Steve Schwab, he's the founder and CEO of Casago. Steve has over 18 years of experience serving the vacation rental industry. His vision has created a blueprint for world-class customer service. Steve serves as a pioneer in performance-driven industry software. His position as a managing partner in Streamline Vacation Rental Software has allowed him to create many industry-first technologies that continue to change our market today. Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Brian and Matthew. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. Matt and I have talked quite a bit about you, and just the brief description that I give. I mean, Streamline coming in, helping pioneer one of the leading software technologies in our industry, and then obviously starting Casago and the success that you've had there. Very impressive, especially for our industry. So what I'd love to do first is give you the opportunity to just give us a little bit of your background, what you guys are doing with Casago, and where you see the industry today.
Sure. Well, my background was originally in the military. I was an Army Ranger, served there for 9 years, got out, went to college, ended up down in Mexico, a little beach town called Rocky Point. By pure accident, got into vacation rentals. Didn't have a website, didn't have anybody helping. It was kind of a trial by fire, if you will. Got going and took off. As it started to grow, we had one of our competitors in town actually left with everybody's money. All the HOAs called. We came in and just through some goodwill of paying people's bills without being able to find them, we had enough good press that we sort of became the de facto property management of town, and our reputation grew. Carlos Corzo ended up being one of my homeowners, and through that relationship and friendship and partnership, his genius and my on the ground tactics was able to create some magic there. So going forward, we had some rock star employees who have, we have 83 employees now that have been with us for more than 10 years. Now that about half of them have been with us for more than 15 now. So real stable environment, but some of them who wanted to go, I started to realize if they left, we were going to miss out on them. So we started offering them equity in other cities. And that became the beginning of our franchise model and the infrastructure as a service in property management. So grew it out from there. And we came into the US 2007 during the last crash. One of the property manager who I knew here in Scottsdale had ran into some problems, called me up, and that was our entrance into the US. And from there, we've grown it into 32 markets now. So
wow. How many units total within the system now, Steve?
As of now, we're just sitting under 5,000.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah, one of the things that strikes me is the beginning of that story in particular is just so common of so many, I would say, of the leaders of this industry, right? This isn't an industry that many people, and I think it's where it is in its life cycle. They didn't come out of college and say, okay, I'm going to start a property management company, right? It's just good business people who found themselves and saw an opportunity. And I think that's how great industries usually do get started, and then have really kind of taken it and grown it from there. One of the questions, and we talked about this just briefly before we jumped on, Steve, is love to get your thoughts as someone who has really seen this industry go, in your words, from where property managers didn't have websites, right, to then the listing sites, and then where we made them, truly online, real door, real time bookable, and just everything it's really been involved. I would say everyone would agree now that we're really in a period of some consolidation. I think just thinking back, just over the last year, probably Explore's clients, probably 4 or 5% have been acquired, some of them leading to better opportunities for our company and some not, which I think is the way it goes. But regardless, I think no one would disagree that seems to be kind of the theme of this period and the growth of this industry. As we think about guest experience, what does that consolidation mean for the guest experience? Is it better today because of it? Is it going to be better in the future? Is it more of in the future, this will lead to better things, but we've got to go through this? I mean, sitting back and looking, I mean, what does all this consolidation, where's it end? I mean, where do we get to, do you think, as an industry?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, like the only thing that is constant about this industry is that it's constantly changing, right? So first coming in, if you had your own website, and did really well with that website. You could be sort of the local guy that got all the leads. Homeowners came to you almost no matter what kind of job you did, because you could provide reservations. Logistics weren't nearly as important. And then over time, in came the marketplaces, then the OTAs that were listing sites. And at first, that was that sort of consolidation of just listings was actually not a good thing for the industry. Over time, they got better at it. Property managers had to step up their game. Transparency came into effect. Reviews, these sort of things. So now we're in a place where the property managers themselves are being consolidated, right? So as of right now, I think there's a lot of focus just on financials, with the margin compressions that have happened through technology, through listing sites, through marketplaces, competition. I think that from a financial point of view, there might be more stability for property managers who are consolidated because they have, the sort of PE, finances behind them. But overall, I don't think that the consolidation is at a place yet where it's really creating that experience engine that builds out a better experience. It's really top-down consolidation. So, I don't believe we're there yet. From a technology point of view, I think there's resources now that are coming through where you're starting to see better interactions through technology, apps, communication, automated door locks that are now being not only just a door lock, but it's also part of that environment where these larger firms have the resources to leverage that. But we're not quite there where the really large guys are able to dig in truly, 3-4 levels deep and turn those wrenches and call that local person know who to call, that local person at 2 a.m. To fix a toilet, to provide that that guest experience to get things fixed.
Do you really think we're ever going to get to a position where even the big guys are going to be able to do something like that? I mean, we're not operating hotels. And I think one of the true things about vacation rentals is, and we were talking about it earlier, is each home is independent. Each home has its own identity. Each home is in a subdivision. They're miles apart in some cases. And each market's completely different. The homeowners are different. The way the units operate is different. And the way the expectation of the traveler is completely different market to market. Do you think there's a real way, other than some implementation automation into homes, to get to a place where we really say technology is going to take over and we can say everything's going to be exactly the same way across all markets, and then be able to translate that to a streamlined customer experience on the ground?
I think it's nearly impossible. I mean, never say never, but when you look at just the different cultures and expectations that happen from homeowners of one market to homeowners of a different market, right? And commission, experience, and how things are, how their guests are checked in, how they're screened, what the expectations of those guests are. It's so different. Yeah. When you go to that city, we've seen property managers who've come in and tried to run, a West Coast market like their East Coast market and end up just going bankrupt because of it. You got to dance the devil's dance when it comes to, each market, right? You may know the immutable principles of property management: transparency, honesty, clean properties, communication. Those all stay consistent, but everything else is up for negotiation. When you walk into those markets, those homeowners own those markets, and you're at their what's the word I'm looking for?
Call. It's basically
their mercy.
The homeowner.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, you're at their mercy. You can cut that last part out. Yeah, you're at their mercy, and so you better understand that they're the ones that own these properties, not you. And if you're not doing the job that they're expecting, you're not going to get there. So when it comes to technology, if you don't know their property, the quirks of their property, if you don't know who to call at 2 a.m. in Snowshoe, West Virginia, that you can reliably get a hold of, they can go over there and fix that guest problem when the heat's out. How are you ever going to operate a great property management, guest engine, experience engine? You just can't. So I think technology as a whole helps, I think technology will never ever fix the fact that this is a wrench turning, toilet cleaning, window wiping, bed making, get on the phone and have a conversation industry. And so there's an intersection between those two.
Yeah. And one of the concerns I've had is, and I think I've brought this up with you before, Brian, but look, my background, I came from a PE run, owned company, a couple of them, right? And so I understand how they think. And I wonder if some of the valuations I look at when you think about what Steve's talking about are not the valuations of operating companies. These are the valuations of, at a minimum, probably tech-enabled businesses, right? Our valuations certainly have not hit, not within, I think, the operators, like a SaaS product. But the valuations, I would say, have rivaled tech-enabled. And I wonder if there's a little bit of a WeWork going on here where the frenzy has WeWork was valued like a tech company when really it was just an office leasing company and a lot of smoke. And you just wonder Steve, do you think about, when you think about those valuations, I know, look, you've grown yours organically, but when these get a lot of these others, Vacasa, obviously Steve Milo's been in the news lately, making big acquisitions. When you think about Ryson, and certainly in my neck of the woods, Southern at 1,200 units, but like that money's got to be paid back. And it's not just that it's got to be paid back. There are big expectations as to the returns on that money because they view it as, I put my money here as opposed to over here where it could have returned Y, so it needs to return, or X, and so it now needs to return Y. I mean, how do you think about that with our industry and being a wrench turning industry?
I mean, at the end of the day, we really are a service industry, right? And so when you look at traditional multiples on service industries, you're looking at multiple, trailing multiples of EBITDA instead of looking at future values of scale. It's hard to see, and I'm not a PE guy myself, but when I look at these numbers, I'm like, people are buying these large property managers up for 8, 9, 10, 11x. And these are just contracts. These aren't assets. These aren't software as a service. Unless you take it to IPO and somehow, show that, maybe show the public that you can continue to scale at those rates. How does it end? I don't know.
It's interesting.
It's really interesting. And this is an interesting conversation because we are a service. Well, in my mind, we're a service business. There was a podcast that came out this week that I was listening to, and they were saying, no, we're actually the complete opposite. We're an e-commerce business because people are going onto a website, they're clicking on homes, they're booking the home through this e-commerce site, and we just provide the service behind it, very similar to like an Amazon. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, I'm going, actually, we are a service-based business. Unless you're building technology where the people are actioning that e-commerce side and you own that technology, we are not e-commerce.
Brian, I totally agree. I mean, unless you are a travel brand that can scale, that organically with your own website and SEO, you're not depending on OTAs, marketplaces, these sort of things. If you're not tech enabled from the point of view that you own your own tech, putting your own travel brand on and traffic coming to that up against your own tech, and then saying we service that is one model. Going out and buying off the shelf property management software, listing all your properties on OTAs, and then hiring a bunch of people to service that and calling yourself a tech company or an e-commerce company is you're fooling yourself if that's what you think you are.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, let's talk a little about that because it is an industry, your industry now and I mean that in your secondary industry of franchising, right? Within the vacation rental industry, though, that is an area where a lot of value can be brought to the franchisees. Is that kind of how you view the role kind of a franchisor in this industry, is being, the ability to really have custom built technology. Obviously, you've made some acquisitions of some technology. I know you've got a good group of engineers there that are working on building on top of that, or building, your own independent. How do you view franchising and its value given the landscape we're in today with vacation rentals?
I think we're sort of in an interesting place right now. If you look at the top 10 residential real estate companies, they're all franchises. And why is that? It goes back to what we were talking about before, right? If you are in Big Bear, California, and you're not that local guy that knows who to call or how to get things done, it's really hard to have a great service. But at the same time, if you're that local guy, do you really have the access to enterprise tools, to amazing revenue managers, to all the sort of things that the big guys have, right? Well, you probably don't. So I see franchising a lot as infrastructure as a service. So we're providing a community of people who come together. We're providing the infrastructure, enterprise infrastructure, as a service, so that you can be the local hero. We talk a lot about local heroes. You being that local hero who's on the ground, loving on those homeowners. You own your own company. It's not somebody else's. You own it. It's your risk. You're the entrepreneur. You're making it happen. But you're coming underneath a brand that has scale and size and technology, and has the ability to help you be successful, advise you when with expertise that you couldn't afford on your own. And that infrastructure makes you able to compete with the large guys from a resources point of view, but still have that advantage of being the person who knows your homeowners, is invested into your homeowners. You love your community, you care about your community, because you're not from some other city that got a suit that came in from another city that got placed, and you're just there to turn the numbers and make sure you're profitable. You live there and you love this place, and you're responsible to your neighbors, and the city council. And so us as the franchisors is there to give you all the tools and community and expertise so that you can go do what you do, which is just be this awesome local property manager that is that's proud of what you do and is part of that community.
So at what point do you guys basically stop, right? You guys provide all of the infrastructure as far as the revenue management, and even that topic on its own. Revenue management in a local market is very difficult. You have to know all of the nuances, seasonality. It changes drastically market to market. So how do you guys support that? Because that in itself it's an enormous market, or an enormous exercise.
Sure. I mean, it's all about partnership, right? So making sure that we're having communication and discussions with our local managers, our local Casago owners, making sure that we're doing weekly reviews. So a lot of local companies will understand the market, understand the different communities within inside of it, understand the different nuances of, how's beachfront doing compared to the beach view, or how's ski and ski outs comparing to off mountain properties. Those are the conversations you have to be able to have. But then also, our revenue manager Tom Lyons, has 20 years with Starwood. He is a data scientist.
How much data do you guys look at, and what are you guys doing with data? To me, data is fascinating, especially when I'm looking at guest data, trying to understand what the guests are doing, how far can we take the guest experience based on data. I'm going to throw Matt in there really quick, and this is pretty much off the cuff. One of the things that I'm loving about using a system like Ziva, which is voice connected activity within the homes, is that I'm starting to learn the questions that the guests are asking. How far into technology are you guys going with your products? And what are you guys considering to be able to enhance guest experience within the homes using technology?
Within the home, structure matters. So making sure that the property itself is working properly, being able to check and monitor those through sensors proactively is a big part of what we're working on. The sensor technology is becoming exponentially cheaper and more reliable and better connected. Knowing if that property, if the heat's working, knowing if the property, the Wi-Fi is working, knowing if the water's running, knowing if there's a flood, knowing, if there's any sort of red herrings going on with that property in real time. And then, interactions between guest and property manager are all documented, recorded, classified, and then brought out to make sure that we're starting to see where the trends are. Those sort of documentations over time and over mass amount of properties really starts to let you see where the opportunities are to make a better guest engine.
It's interesting. Steve, you mentioned earlier, I'd love to get your take on this because it was the apps. I think guest communication really is one of our first, items as an industry to really tackle because it does eliminate a lot of the friction and allows us to. The first part of guest experience is setting the right expectations, and you do that through really good communication. And I think it's still an area it's pretty broken, but fragmented maybe is the right word. But you mentioned apps, and there have been a huge growth. Brian and I have talked about this. I mean, probably one of the more popular new ones is DAC. They're making waves, but all the way back to Glad to Have You, right? Which is probably maybe arguably one of the first ones.
Or Guestbook.
Or Guestbook. I didn't really think of you as an app. Yeah, I should. That's a good point. But you were after, Glad to Have You, Guestbook. But you do. But then that brings up a good point. You got the tablet systems, but then you've also got, I would say, the Rubaroos, which. Yep. And Breezeway even has got a little bit of a tech or a guest communication aspect of their tech. Is apps where, I guess my first question is, are apps where we end up? When I look at the data, really seems to struggle to get people to want to put these apps on their phone for vacation stays. Not anybody, but a lot of the success I hear claimed is driven through, that's where your lock code is. So, of course, they're downloading the app, right? What's your thought on guest communication? And is it just that we need to be multi-channel because everybody and during the buying cycle, certain guest or communication forms are better than others, pre-purchase, after the purchase, during the stay? I mean, what's your thought on that communication?
App adoption is really low when it comes to guests, right? With homeowners, it's pretty high because they're invested. They've got an ongoing relationship with you. And a lot of what you're trying to do when you're getting a guest to download that app is to build a long-term relationship. They don't want to be spammed. They're not sure what the value is. I don't think apps is where we ultimately end up, but I think it's one channel of many. From a logistics point of view, when you're running vacation rentals as opposed to a hotel, the amount of trust that a guest needs from you is greater because they're basically going out on their own away from you, whether it's in the woods of, the Oregon or the mountains of West Virginia or the beaches of Mexico, whatever that is. They're not checking in with you anymore at the front desk. They used to, but now they're driving straight there. There's always anxiety. Is it going to work? Am I going to get in? Is there going to be a problem when I show up? Is somebody going to answer the phone? It's not like a hotel where you check into the front desk, somebody's down there. If they don't answer the phone, you walk down to the front desk and find out what the heck. There's a lot of trust there. And I always talk about how reservations is a trust relationship, right? People make reservations trusting in the transaction that the property is going to be there when they show up, that it wasn't some sort of ruse. They're going to make sure that, they could get in, that it's what was expected, that, that expectation meets what they actually find out. Getting people to use apps is difficult because there's a hurdle there of effort to get them to download it and put it on there. I think that you're going to have multiple communications. Rubaru does something pretty good with text where you don't have to download their app. The app's sort of an internal thing. And then suddenly I just checked in Sun River with one of our new franchises, Stacy and Greg. They've got a great operation there. They're using Rubaru. And so rented one of their properties from them, went to check in. I get the text message. There was nothing to download. It had all the information in there. When I got to the door, I didn't have to go try to find an app because honestly, I was driving a motorcycle. I wasn't going to download apps while I'm driving a motorcycle and all this sort of stuff. I just sat there for 15 minutes. The text message came early in the day, which was a great thing because I was in the mountains. Who knows if I was going to have Wi-Fi,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I thought that was a pretty good solution there. I think between advancements of lock technology, where I think locks are going to get a lot better. I think that text message apps, I think you got to throw everything against the wall and see what's going to stick. Eventually, as we look down the road with 5G, the home itself will be its own tech-enabled, solution where it's answering questions. What they're using. When there's a refrigerator out. When they're about to check in. It recognizes people's faces, make sure it's who's supposed to be checking in. I think a lot of that is where we end up, but it's still a long road to get there.
What's your opinion on consolidation on this side of the technology? And we've seen the PMS consolidation for the most part, the bigger picture on some of the bigger software. But what we haven't seen is a consolidation on guest apps and door lock systems and all of these extra applications. As a property manager, what I find is we have so many systems and so many things to implement, it's expensive. Every time you add something, it's an extra $10 a property here and another $20 here and a percentage here. And now you start to add that onto your property management software and you're like, oh my God, all of it's expensive. I want to do it all, but I just cannot. First, I can't afford to do it. Second, the implementation side of things is an absolute nightmare because everything's requiring different things. Do you ever think we're going to have a consolidation on, let's call third-party apps, guest apps, all of that side of the industry?
I think at some point, the solutions that the property management softwares have to provide is from beginning to end in order for them to be, to be a solid solution. I think you're vulnerable if you're doing secondary services to a PMS. As PMSs look at those like, wow, they're charging that for those. I could do it ourselves and charge less. We've already got the system built, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of the secondary services end up being consumed and becoming less valuable over time, which will probably create a consolidation, which will probably create a beginning to end solution. A lot of even if you just look at Streamline, it does everything from beginning to end. Maybe it doesn't do certain things as well as third parties, but there's pressure on those PMSs to make sure that you do everything as well as third parties beginning to end. So it's going to eventually get there. And there's always going to be a new innovation that comes out as a secondary, offering, and the PMSs are always going to be trying to catch up with those, and especially with how many PMSs there are in the world today. 10 years ago there was 4 or 5 of them, and and every now and then you hear about somebody who show up to a couple shows and they kind of disappear. Now it's there's I don't know how many there are. There's like 60 of them or something like that are out there.
We're over 200.
That was over 200.
Yeah.
See, I can't even keep track.
Yeah.
There's so many.
There's so many.
Yeah.
I worry about that. Actually, I feel like that fragmentation is going to slow down our ability to do anything that is remotely standardized at all. If you boil it back down to a few large ones, they're like, yeah, we all kind of do, the guest experience is going to be reasonable. We're going to have advantages, disadvantages. But you start throwing out all of these 200 property management softwares and at different stages of development and different APIs. And how are you going to get, if you're GAC or Breezeway or Rubaru, how are you going to connect to 200 different PMSs? You're just not. The resources aren't there.
Yeah.
No, and you can't support it, right, Matt? I mean,
no.
you have to start picking which ones your partners are because it's expensive to do it on that side as well. I mean, you have to maintain the API, and you also, in a lot of instances, you have to pay the PMS to be a partner.
Yeah, I think today at Explorer we have 28, and that's just in the U.S. So I'm at the Short Stay Summit getting ready for the UK. roll out, and you've got Super Control, and you've got, I mean, there's just a bunch of them international that aren't even in the US. So then you have all those you're going to have to build too. You could not.
Proprietary ones, right?
Yeah, as a vendor, you're trying to pick the winners. Who are the ones that my clients are going to gravitate towards so I can be there when they get there?
What this industry truly needs is a really solid middleware.
Yeah.
Somebody who is providing, if you want to be the next thing, if you can build a middleware and start connecting to everybody and letting everybody connect to you, you could become something pretty special.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for a while, a consolidated API, basically an API database. Everybody connects to you and you push out that data.
There was a guy in Tampa that was, I don't know, I feel like it was like pre-COVID. He was trying to, he's still doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because each one of these softwares has a completely different API call for the exact same thing. A reservation isn't called a reservation. Guest data is completely different in each one of these softwares.
Yeah.
It's an expensive exercise for them as well.
No, and then maintaining it.
That rise of that middleware will be a massive lift. But if you pull it off and everybody starts now you become the standard and everybody kind of has to build to you. You change that dynamic. But until that happens, we're going to be so severely hampered and fragmented in new technology.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, Steve, we really do appreciate the time you've been very gracious with your time today. What for a last question, I mean, what do you think we see over the next 2 to 3 years? Is it more of the consolidation? Obviously, we are seeing softening key data, not in every market, but I would say those that really hit big spikes during COVID are definitely seeing softening, especially in the shoulder season. So I think I'm not saying we're returning to 2019 numbers, but our industry is coming back down to a little bit more of some normality, I think, of seasonality and rates and stuff like that. But what is the kind of macro level trends that you see over the next 2 or 3 years that you guys are trying to anticipate, at Casago for your franchisees? Because that is a big piece of what they pay you for, right? Is to understand where the industry is going to be in a couple of years, so they don't have to think about things like that.
Well, as of right now, I think we're heading back into some times of uncertainty. It feels a little bit like, in a very weird way, kind of beginnings of COVID, where there's all this uncertainty and you're seeing markets get soft really quick. These gas prices, I mean, are affecting every drive-in destination greatly. We knew there'd be a softening of the drive-in destinations. These drive-in mountain destinations were just on fire for years. Since through COVID, I think that we've been anticipating a lot more fly-in destinations getting strong again. There again, fuel prices are kind of changing, are driving up those gas prices. If blue-collar style markets should do better, that are less expensive. People are worried about the inflation. People are worried about travel expenses and what's going to be happening. I think consolidation continues on. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to the multiples that are being paid over the next year and a half. I think that's going to be a really curious trend. If it continues upwards or if it starts to back off, because the PE guys are saying, yeah, those numbers were great, but now we're looking at this year's and you've gone backwards. Can we pay you the same multiples? That's a big question for everybody. I think personally and selfishly that the franchise model rises, the ability to compete as a local property manager and have enterprise tools with a group of experts who are there to empower you becomes more important when there's consolidation. I think that grows. I think the market's ripe for it. And then from there outward, it's really a matter of just trying to keep your margins in a good place. I think we'll probably see some property managers who are on top of their game with this inflation and keep we'll give a little more of a raise because we need to. We'll keep doing this, and they're afraid to go to their homeowners, and they end up putting themselves into a margin compression where they just can't make it. So as you go forward, whoever you are as a property manager, make sure you have a really good handle on your P&Ls, and you're going to have to probably go to homeowners and raise rates or change, service levels or whatever it is, because it's going to get a lot more expensive, with the inflationary rates we have really quick, and it could get you into trouble fast. So making sure that we're keeping an eye on that is going to be critical to moving forward over the next 3 years.
So on that topic, I mean, homeowners is a big one. I know we're trying to wrap up here, Matt, but I've got a question on homeowners, because one of the big things that happened was we had a lot of investors that saw the vacation rental market over COVID, and they came in, made a whole bunch of money during COVID, and all they've seen is just money, 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 money. Now we're hitting soft markets and they're going, where's my revenue? Yeah. So how do you handle that as a property manager? Because it's they're saying, well, last year we were so busy and we were making so much money, and now you're going, well, yeah, but things are changing quite a bit. We're going back to pre-COVID stuff. You have to understand that markets are a little bit different. Interest rates are starting to affect the way travelers are behaving. How do you manage homeowners from that perspective? Because it's not just the inflation, it's on the revenue side as well.
Well, you're going to have to get on them. You're going to have to educate them early. You're going to have to explain the numbers. Investors from one side are easier because they understand numbers. They're more sophisticated. They'll be, when you show them inflation numbers and you show them, what your market's doing on AirDNA or key data or whatever you're using, showing them how this market's changing and then reacting to it. And if you can show that you're beating the market, even if you're going downwards, you're probably in a better position. If you're dealing with homeowners who are emotional about it, that's a much tougher argument. And where I think the industry is going to struggle is the RBOs are going to see who bought, and they did it. They didn't want to invest any more money than they had to. They were tight up against the mortgage, so they didn't go get a property manager. They've been just renting it on their own, and suddenly now it gets softened. They're going to panic and drop prices, and they're probably going to win in the beginning because they're going to drop prices, and they're going to suck up a lot of the air, a lot of the occupancy, but it's going to drive they're going to drive markets downward because when they drop prices dramatically, what are you going to do? You're going to have to drop prices too. So I think that you're going to see lower ADRs. I think you better educate your homeowners early before it really gets difficult. Showing them market data and industry data in newsletters and consolidated reports is going to help you win. And, sometimes if you drop by 20%, but you're showing them, hey, by the way, the market's dropped by 20%, you dropped by 20%, but the market's dropped by 25, 30%. So we actually got you ahead. If you go somewhere else, you can do that, but just know that if the next guy just matches the market, you're down another 10%. Having good conversations, and at the end of the day, you can't commoditize trust. And how do you build trust? Well, you build trust through communication, reliability, and providing those actions that they know that you've got their best interests, being owner centric. Those are the things you have to do before you have to do a recovery.
Great advice.
So much to unpack.
Yeah, no, some great advice as our industry kind of gets ready here for some more changes, as if we haven't had enough over the past 3, 4, 5 years. But hey, as Steve said, that's the one constant in this industry. So Steve, thank you again. Really couldn't be more appreciative of your time today. I think our listeners will find a lot of really sound advice here. If people want to get, if they want to get in contact with you, either just about some of the topics today or about the franchise model that you've got, what's the best way to do that? I'm guessing email or through the website.
Yeah, you can go to the website at casago.com/franchising, or you can just email me directly, steve@casago.com.
Perfect.
So just my first name and the company, and send me an email. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about anything, not just franchising, just general advice.
Great.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it, Steve. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
That's it for this week's episode of GuestX. Be sure to sign up for our email list at guestxpodcast.com. That's guest, the letter X, podcast.com. And follow us on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. We are Mr. Guest Experience, Brian Hamawi, and Matthew Loney signing off and reminding you to always create a customer experience worth talking about.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.